I've been on drop for a long time, and pretty much since the HD6XX was first released, people have been asking for an HD8XX, lower cost version of the HD800S. Well, that's a pretty compelling thought in itself, but with the retail version of the HD8XX, the game is completely changed. So what you get with the HD8XX, if you want to see that, check out my unboxing video earlier. However, I just want to say that I really went through comparing these in the short amount of time that I had with my HD800 with both stock pads and Deconi pads. I tried it with the stock cable. I also have a Pentacon balanced Sennheiser cable. I also have a third-party Sennheiser balanced Pentacon cable. This is from Wireworld. And I also compared it to my HD820 and my HD650, which is the same headphone as an HD6XX, except just not Midnight Blue, so that I could get an idea of, hey, what kind of reference is everyone else going to be coming from, and what can I do to really understand this headphone? Now, the HD8XX retail version that everyone is going to be able to get is no longer just a little bit more bass that you could kind of maybe tell. There was 3 important changes made to it. Besides the blue ring, the important changes are an increase in the mid bass and the lower bass. Sub bass is still about the same. Then you have a decrease in the upper mids, where I find it to be impacting with female vocals. There's a little bit less metallic tinginess. There's a little bit less grating on some nerves. I've got a whole written review where I'm going to be inserting a bunch of different music impressions. But for example, a pop song, I listened to Doja Cat, and she was singing a song and her voice just sounded a little bit more metallic on the HD800. It kind of surprised me, even with my Deconi pads to kind of help it be a little bit more removed. There was a bit more organic, easier to listen to quality with the female vocals on the HD8XX, and it fortunately did not sound like it was a little bit more distant. It just sounded more organic and more warm, better integrated with the upper mid bass, mid bass and sub bass. Also, there's a decrease in the resonance, 5 to 6 kilohertz. If you see your graphs, you know your graph's like, okay, it still looks about the same on the graph. But without that resonance, I think that's actually helping out the female vocals there, because you have your female vocals, you know, not too far from 1,000 kilohertz, whatever, depending where someone is singing, but there's a harmonic, you've got your foundational note that the woman is singing, like, but then there's going to be harmonics that repeat at higher frequencies. Getting very technical here, but it'll hit that 5 to 6 kilohertz range, and you'll often hear with t sounds or s sounds a kind of it hooking onto the sound, getting some sibilance. You might actually be hearing some sibilance on your headphones right now through the YouTube compression and everything on whatever headphones you're using. You may hear me, you know, getting stuck a little bit on the S's more than what I actually hear talking in real life. You probably also hear the room reverb. I worked on that, I don't know. With this, I feel like there's actually fairly less sibilance. I think that a lot of it was caught up in that resonance, even though the range of treble is not really decreased. So you actually have pretty present and sparkling treble without glare, without that harshness. And that's pretty insane that a headphone that I had a pretty dialed in perfect for the HD800 system, and I'm going to this and I'm just like, you know, smoother, easier to listen to. Now, that's my personal perspective, but for me, that makes this so much more of an all-rounder type of headphone. I could see that this be a top-of-the-line Summit Fi headphone for many, many, many people, more people than a treble emphasized high headphone, I think it's a little bit more welcoming than something that's really bass heavy. Got a lot of fun flavor in sips. I think this one you can listen to for hours now, compared to some other ones where you might have some, you might want to take a break after an hour or two. Like, I absolutely love my HD800, but this is going to be easier to listen to longer term. The extra bass, it's not a very stronger amount of extra bass, but it is so nicely coherent with the whole frequency range that I don't feel like I have to turn it up louder to try to get that bass to fill in. Also helps with longer listening, and it's just a really cohesive, organic sound. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of people that I think will feel like this appeals to them. Honestly, I feel like you're good to go with the basic kit. You can get a Sennheiser Pentacon cable if your amp sounds best out of a balanced port. Then get a balanced cable. But if your amp sounds really good out of single-ended, and you've got enough power, you've got a low distortion, this is a decent cable. Maybe not the thinnest, and as you can see, the strain relief ends here, and then the plug starts here. It's a pretty long plug, but you really feel like you're adulting now. You've got a serious plug. You're gonna generally not have many issues with that. Another thing that some people have asked me to test a couple things. So one of them was how, if it had too much treble. Well, I will tell you that I don't think that this has necessarily less treble than an HD800S. If that was too much treble, you might still be in trouble. But there's that less glare, there's that less resonance, and I think that just makes it easier to listen to. So if you specifically felt there was sibilance, but the amount of treble wasn't too much for you, this will have a very similar amount of treble and just be less glaring, more organic. If you asked, another person asked me, they have thicker frames. I'm wearing my thicker framed, wider glasses right now, and when I put this on, yeah, the top of the ear cups, I could probably fit, a finger in there, especially when I wear my other hat, which I will insert in. It doesn't sound like when you break the seal of the ear pads, it doesn't seem to be letting the bass escape, but there wasn't much of a seal to begin with. When you really look at these headphones, this silver mesh is just open on the inside, and then there's that felt dust cover there that's acoustically very transparent, maybe not perfectly, but very transparent. And it's not it's not building up pressure like a closed headphone. It's not doing stuff to increase the bass, like bass tubes. So I don't feel like breaking the seal necessarily hurts the sound. However, when you do have it further away from your head, it sounds like the driver is further away. I still think it's doing all of its things, and I think it sounds good even with that. Next up, we also had someone ask, how was the cable? I think I covered that. The Sennheiser Pentacon cable is the same construction. Can't tell exactly what's on the inside, but I do know that they're both silver-plated copper, oxygen-free copper. And I think that it's not going to, kink up on you easily. I think it's nice and easy to roll up. It is Kevlar reinforced for strength, but it's a thicker cable. So, if you want to customize something, you saved money on the front end. You can get a custom cable if you really want to. But I think you're good to go with the stock cable. Another question was just that, is it losing detail? Is it losing anything that the HD800 had? Well, it's losing that kind of metallic glare that I mentioned, but I was listening to my setup in Apple lossless streaming It's kind of what I had time for. And, you know, I'm still picking out really little details. If you listen to the Muse Resistance album and the Resistance title track, in the warm-up phase, it was super clear to me all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, there's like sounds of like the ship powering up underneath that bass swell. So you're not having a problem from the bass masking over the mids and the little details. You're still hearing all that. As you go through the song, you're going to hear cool room ambience where I was listening to Arcade Fire and their Neon Bible album, the pipe organ in Intervention, that track. You know, you've got some really cool room reverb. You can really sense the recording environment for that organ. I never noticed before that the track Intervention that comes out later in that, or yeah, later at the very beginning of that track, there's like a piano, sounds like maybe an upright piano instead of a baby grand or a grand piano. It sounds like kind of a little bit steely, a little bit more jaunty. And it starts off centered, and as the track goes on, it pans off to your right. So for you, it would be this way, but it pans off to the side very distinctly. And then as the track goes like 5 or 10 more seconds, it goes all the way left. So it's just kind of funny that you could really definitely pick out all those details that kind of reveal what the thought was for the master engineer, also the artist and the musician. You could tell when they have a lot of saliva in their mouth. It's great because, okay, you could be thinking that this is over analysis. You could be thinking, you could look at all the graphs and you could see how everything is measured. But the fun part about it, the really cool part about it is all those tracks I've mentioned to, I've listened to them for years. I've listened to them beyond count. And it's really cool when you go back to your collection and it's almost like you get to hear these songs again for the first time. So let's wrap this up a little bit by talking about who I think this is for. And, you know, this is not for someone who wants a very warm headphone, doesn't want exaggerated bass. I do think that the amount of bass here, you know, this is pretty natural. You're gonna hear your bass guitar, you're gonna hear synth. I'm gonna have a whole bunch attached to the bottom of this video. I'm gonna put some playlists in from Spotify and Tidal and Apple Music, so you can listen to kind of the stuff I was listening to that I think sounds really good on this. You're still going to hear a threatening sound when you listen to Angel by Massive Attack. You could listen to EDM with this, but it's not going to be the best headphone for drum and bass, a lot of wub-wub, dubstep. You're going to have to pick and choose because it's not going to have that wash of bass. You know, sometimes that's really fun. And that's part of why I have so many headphones, is because there's a different flavor. But for rock, alt, acoustic, jazz, orchestral, I think a lot of EDM, you're going to actually have a pretty well-rounded experience with the HD8XX. It is a bit more expensive. I can't believe it, but I actually feel like the highs for me were a little bit more organic than the HD6XX, HD650, but that headphone is super famous for having really natural mids. I think this does the mids just a little bit better. Everyone's gonna have different taste. So I think it's really good as an all-rounder there. It's not going to appeal to people who are really sensitive to highs, but conversely, it's also not going to be the best headphone for people who need more and more highs. So some people already have told me that they heard this retail version and they prefer the old HD800 and HD800S, and that's fine. Some people prefer headphones with even higher treble peaks or more upper mids to really emphasize female vocals. You know, this has plenty of sparkle, but there's probably some people who just want more. So it's not a very V-shaped headphone. It's not a very warm headphone with a lot of, well, for you, it's not a very warm headphone with a lot of bass. And when you're tuning like a frequency graph, it's just a little bit more well-rounded, all-rounder, and a superb headphone for gamers, but it may be beyond their budget. For a gamer, I might actually recommend, I do really, this is definitely elite tier if you're a gamer. You've got these angled drivers that match your ear angle, and if you have a spatial audio track for music or surround spatial audio for gaming, which I have at my PlayStation 5, and I have a bunch of peripherals. I have my 5 controllers downstairs. I think for a gamer with a bigger, deeper pocket, this might last you a lot longer than a graphics card for being top of the line. But if you're just want to spend just like, $200 or $300, this is clearly $1,100 to be raised in future runs. So it's not for someone who's trying to stay on a low budget. It's also not going to be very good on a bus, on the go. That should be obvious, right? These are at-home headphones. Possibly you could use them in an office. A headphone is way quieter than desktop speakers or a monitor speaker. It's going to be so much more rewarding than a monitor speaker. You might be able to use this, definitely work from home. And if you have like an office where you can lock the door and keep it safe, you might still want to use this and be able to hear when people come in and want to talk to you, and you're not shutting yourself off. You want to be part of the workforce. Open headphones may be good, but if you're in a cubicle, I might say, stick with a closed back headphone or a less expensive one, maybe even the HD58X Jubilee, just because you're going to have a little bit more bass to compete with, sub bass especially, to compete with the office noise, and it's going to be less expensive, so it's going to be a little bit less like, if someone steals it, again, the price. But overall, I think that there's going to be a wide market for this. It's going to have, just as much as the $600 price range is going to put it in more feasible range for more people to afford it. Not everybody, but more people. And just like the more organic upper mids and less sibilance is going to make it just a little bit easier to accommodate someone who is a little bit sensitive to those things. That's going to be nice. Someone who wants a little bit more bass, it's just a little bit more, but it might be just enough to make them happy. But when you start adding all those things up, when you put it all together, sometimes a little difference makes all the difference. And I don't see any negatives to this compared to the HD800S, unless you specifically wanted more treble, unless you really don't like this in person, extremely subtle navy, or you just have some great memories of an older headset like I do. Do I recommend people who already own one of these to get this? It's like, well, that's harder. I was originally going to say, when I was listening to pre-production, I was going to say no. But now with this one, it's going to be a little bit of a harder choice for you, because it doesn't sound like the same exact headphone anymore. There's been, I think there's a bit more of a change between this and the HD800S than there was between the HD800S and the HD800. You won't want to own both. I don't think so. I think one is going to suit your preference more. I'm not going to say everybody run out and buy an HD8XX, but if you get a chance to hear one, if you get to go to a Can Jam and it's ticking your boxes, I think that it's going to be up to you. But sometimes little changes make all the difference. So that's up to you guys. I guess, and also I guess the last person it would not be for is someone who just doesn't like plastics. This is resin, special aerospace resin. get a nice good look at it close up. I've got some other shots that I'll roll in here now. The finish is not all metal all the time, baby, I'm a tank, but it does have really nice lightweight, and it is definitely finely made. It won't be mistaken for a $100, $30 headset. Lastly, I think I should also say that I don't think that people with very long and high cheekbones, they may not love this that much. The pads are pretty thin. That was one of the main reasons why I was kind of using the Sennheiser, the Pentacon ones, because they have a little bit more squishiness that they can go around my bumps. And I've heard people say that they wear these, and depending on where they rest on you, they may fatigue long term because they might press against the bottom of your jaw. So for those people, it's something to just be aware of, pay attention to while it's in your return period. But the HD800 and the HD8XX now have actually been the only headphones that I can put on and after 30 minutes or so forget that I'm wearing them. If I pause the music, it's not getting hot. If I play them, I've been tricked by thinking sounds are happening outside, but it's actually this headphone. It is really well weight distributed and really light. So I don't think anyone will have complaints about the weight, but they may say it's not heavy enough, I don't have enough metal, I don't feel the build quality is high because it's not heavy and metal. So if that's not for you, then that's not for you. All right, so after all that, you've heard the reasons, make up your own mind if you think this is good for you. Definitely consider other people's reviews. This is also going to go to DMS. I think Zeos has heard it already. You're going to hear more other reviewers give their opinions on it. For me, I think that compared directly to an HD800 that I'm super used to, and I did try it with stock HD800 pads too. It's really makes you stop and think about how you can just have a well-rounded do-it-all headphone instead of a maximum effort headphone. All right, thank you so much for watching. Please forgive my bumbles because I was short on time, but it's been great to see you. And again, please hit like and subscribe. Check out my playlist that I'm going to add to the bottom of this, and have a great day.